The desert sun hammered down on the Camp Providence training facility, turning the packed earth into a brittle crust of dust and sweat. Each gust of wind carried fine particles of sand that coated rifles, goggles, and lungs. The thunder of live fire echoed from the shooting range as 24 soldiers lined up with weapons ready. Among them, only one soldier stood out, Corporal Elena Rourke. 3 weeks into the elite marksman certification program, she had already earned the reputation of being the anomaly. Not just for being the only woman, but for being the quiet one. The precise one. The one who didn't flinch when the mockery began. Look who showed up again. Wrong uniform, sweetheart. The medical corps is that way. Hope your nail polish doesn't jam the bolt action. The comments weren't new. They came like clockwork, echoing across the yard each morning. Elena never responded. She didn't have to. Her hands moved with methodical confidence, assembling her M110 sniper rifle piece by piece. Her eyes never left her task, not even when Master Sergeant Dane Mercer, a mountain of muscle and hostility with 4 combat tours under his belt, made sure to walk close enough to drop his voice just for her ears. "I still don't get it," he muttered that morning, arms crossed as he watched her work. "We've got warriors begging for a slot in this course, and they give it to a publicity stunt with perfect handwriting." Elena didn't look up. She clicked the scope into place and adjusted the cheek rest. Her voice was low, even, and unshaken. "When a moment of truth comes, Sergeant, I'll be ready." Mercer scoffed and moved on, but the tension didn't. It lingered, thick as the heat. Elena had grown up in the wild hills of northern Idaho. Her grandfather, Harlan Rourke, had taught her to shoot before she was tall enough to reach a rifle bench without standing on a crate. He had once been a decorated sniper in the Vietnam War, though most of his stories have been buried with him. He trained her in silence, in forests and snowfields, teaching her one rule above all else. You fire to protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Now, surrounded by seasoned soldiers, Elena felt the weight of those lessons like a second skin. The others laughed, joked, taunted. She trained. While they played poker in the barracks, she read field manuals under her bunk lamp. She wasn't trying to prove them wrong. She was trying to prove her grandfather right. The first phase of the test was the 800-meter precision shot. Each soldier would take 3 shots. The instructors stood with clipboards. A hit dead center counted double. Anything outside the inner ring would be noted and penalized. The top 8 shooters would proceed to advanced fieldcraft and covert infiltration. Everyone else would be dismissed. Dane Mercer went first. His shots were tight. 1 bullseye, 1 inside ring, 1 just outside. He smirked like a man who knew he'd already won. Then Elena was called forward. She adjusted her breathing, blocked out the whispers. Her fingers brushed the small photograph taped inside her rifle case. Her grandfather, standing proud in his dress uniform, eyes squinting into the camera like he knew the future was watching him. Elena slipped into position, adjusted for wind, and took her shot. Crack! The target rang, a tiny ripple in the silence. Crack! Another hit. Dead center. Crack! 3 bullseyes. 1 clean after another. The range fell silent. Even Mercer didn't speak. The instructor's voice broke the tension. "Rourke, outstanding marksmanship. Next shooter." She stood, collected her rifle, and returned to her seat. She didn't need to look at anyone. Their silence was loud enough. But this wasn't the victory. This was only the beginning. Elena knew better than to celebrate early. She knew Mercer would come harder, that the other trainees would isolate her further. But she had something none of them could see, a hidden edge born from a legacy that had been passed down in the shadows. One that would soon surface, and when it did, it would rip through their assumptions like a bullet through brittle glass. She wasn't here to survive. She was here to change everything. Week 4 brought a shift in tone. The range tests were over. Now came field exercises, the kind that separated marksmen from actual snipers. The morning briefing was held in the open sun. Sergeant Mercer stood before the class, his sunglasses reflecting the rows of soldiers sitting cross-legged in the dust. His voice carried effortlessly across the yard, every word clipped and cold. "This next phase is infiltration. You'll be paired off in sniper teams. Your mission is to reach an observation post undetected across 3 miles of open terrain. If you're spotted even once, you're out. You've got 5 hours. And no, there are no retries. He began calling out names. Rourke sat still, knowing exactly what was coming. Anderson, you're with Carter. Walsh with Mendoza. Linsky, take Rafik. Thompson, you're with Grant. Names came and went. Pairings formed. Tension mounted. Rourke, Mercer said at last, a slow grin curling under his sunglasses. You're with me. A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the group. Everyone understood what was happening. Mercer had specifically requested to be her partner, not to elevate her, but to control her, to put her under his thumb, to break her personally. Any objections, Corporal? Mercer asked, his voice daring her. No, Sergeant, Elena replied, steady as ever. But inside, she was sharpening steel. The exercise began at sunrise the following day. The terrain was brutal, jagged ridgelines, thick brush, and unpredictable wind shifts. Their objective was a small white mannequin positioned on a distant hilltop, surrounded by instructors with scopes trained in every direction. Elena had spent her evening mapping out 3 potential routes. The best one followed a dry riverbed that snaked below the ridgeline, giving natural cover for most of the approach. It was longer, but safer. She presented it to Mercer before they moved out. Sergeant, the dry bed offers concealment. The other teams are likely to take the ridges or the tree line. We avoid cross-traffic, and we have overhead coverage. Mercer barely glanced at her. We're going straight up the RGL crest. That ridge gives us line of sight early. Time's the priority. With respect, that route leaves us exposed for nearly a kilometer. I said we're taking the ridge. Elena said nothing more. The military hierarchy was absolute, even when it meant walking straight into failure. They crested the first rise within 30 minutes. Elena had already counted 3 vantage points where instructors with glass scopes would have eyes on them. Within the hour, a flare shot into the sky. Disqualified. On the walk back to base, Mercer made sure everyone heard him. Field work isn't about paper scores and textbook calls. It's about instinct, and some folks just don't have the gut for it. Elena walked 2 paces behind him, fists clenched inside her gloves. She'd given the correct tactical suggestion, had mapped out the entire route in advance, and been dismissed. Now he was using her silence as proof of his superiority. That night in the barracks, she found herself alone at the far end of the hall, cleaning her weapon with mechanical care. She unfolded the old letter from her grandfather, its corners frayed from handling. Sometimes the people who need protecting the most are the ones standing alone. She was starting to understand. This wasn't just about who could shoot straight. It was about who could endure being broken apart, who could be pushed to the edge and not fall off. Mercer wasn't testing her skills anymore. He was trying to fracture her mentally, publicly. She would not let him. Not now. Not ever. By week 6, Mercer had escalated his campaign. It was no longer just sarcasm and bad pairings. Now it was subtle sabotage. During an equipment inspection, Mercer flagged Elena's rifle for a worn bolt spring, something within standard tolerances. She was forced to requalify her 0 before class. During weather simulation drills, Mercer hit her with increasingly complex hypotheticals. Rourke, you got a shot at 1,300 meters. Crosswind at 17 miles per hour from northwest, humidity rising, temperature dropping, barometric pressure falling. Your scope's miscalibrated, and your rifle was zeroed at sea level. You're now at 5,200 feet. What's your hole? She gave the answer correctly. He still shook his head. You forgot the Magnus effect. That's a miss. That's a kill shot gone sideways. That's someone dead. Other students began to follow his lead. They didn't outright confront her, but they excluded her. Study groups formed without her name on the list. Meal tables went silent when she approached. She always ended up with the last of the gear, the worst of the assignments. It was Corporal Jace Nolan who finally said what the others wouldn't. I'm not saying she can't shoot, he told a group near the armory lockers. But fieldwork's different. It's about trust. And if Mercer doesn't trust her, maybe we shouldn't either. Another soldier chimed in. He's got 4 tours. He knows what leadership looks like. Elena overheard the entire exchange from the hallway. When she returned to her bunk, she found an unsigned note under her gear. Request transfer while you still have options. She stared at it a long time before folding it neatly and slipping it beside her grandfather's letter. They thought she was alone. They were wrong. She was just getting started. By week 7, the desert heat was no longer the most punishing element at Camp Providence. The real fire came from within, the unrelenting pressure, the isolation, the second-guessing. For Elena Rourke, it was no longer just about passing the sniper program. It was about survival, psychological survival. And yet, the moment that changed everything didn't arrive with fanfare. It came quietly, almost offhand, during a routine morning briefing in the hangar. Major Stiles stepped to the podium with a hard expression. In 10 days, you'll begin your final evaluation. A live fire, full mission simulation in the Nevada mountain range. 30 square miles of hostile terrain, realistic targets, live ammunition. You'll be dropped in teams and graded on infiltration, communication, target acquisition, and coordinated extraction under combat conditions. He paused. This is the test. You either qualify here, or you don't qualify at all. The room buzzed with adrenaline. Soldiers leaned forward in their seats, some exchanging quick glances. For most of them, this was the moment they had been working toward for years. But for Elena, it was something else entirely. It was an opportunity. Mercer's stare found her across the room. He didn't need to speak. His expression said enough. You won't make it. That night, Elena returned to the equipment room long after the lights had gone down. She moved quietly past the sleeping quarters, the hallways lit only by red emergency strips along the floor. She had memorized every map of the Nevada range provided to them. Elevation contours, wind corridors, ridgeline blind spots. But what she really wanted, and what she was about to use, was stored deep in her grandfather's old case. Behind the foam padding in the rifle container, she pried open the hidden latch. Inside was an aged leather-bound field notebook. Her grandfather's sniper log from Vietnam. Inside were not just mission details. There were pages of calculations and real-world adjustments. Tactics for dealing with unstable commanders. Psychological methods for disarming superior officers who used rank as a weapon. Dozens of diagrams for battlefield improvisation and silent team signaling that had never been formally adopted. At the end of the final entry, his handwriting had faded slightly. Victoria, if you're reading this, it means you found the truth for yourself. That you're ready. If you've come this far, then there's one more thing you need to understand. Being a sniper is not about pulling the trigger. It's about knowing when not to. When you're being tested from every angle, trust your training. Trust your judgment. And when they push too far, push back harder. There was a second page behind it, one she hadn't noticed until now. I left something more. Something I never got to use. Folded into the back flap of the logbook was a single dog tag. Not his. Hers. Pre-engraved, military standard, issued by someone who knew she'd be here one day. She stared at it until her eyes blurred. Elena had never believed in destiny. But legacy? Legacy, she understood. The morning of a Nevada drop arrived with the deep thunder of rotors slicing the air. Soldiers lined the helipad in full gear, rifles locked and sealed, visors down. The briefing was short. Standard infiltration. Secure a hard drive simulating enemy intelligence, then extract. Unknown threats would be embedded to simulate resistance. They were told to assume that anything could happen. Mercer made his move as soon as they landed. Rourke, he barked, voice carrying above the wind. You're with Alpha Team. Communications detail. You monitor chatter. No action unless I say so. He grinned just barely. She nodded once. Copy, Sergeant. In the mountains, the game changed fast. Within 6 hours, Alpha Team had secured their package. It had been too easy, honestly. Elena kept her headset tuned to the wideband. And then the signal came. Code Black. The voice from command was urgent. This is not a drill. Repeat, not a drill. Perimeter breach. Armed hostiles confirmed. Live fire authorization granted. All teams reroute to extraction grid Foxtrot 9er. Priority is survival. Mercer's smirk dropped. Say again, he asked the radio, voice tight. Live ammo. Hostile presence real. Get your people out. And the first shot rang out. A thunderclap on the ridge. It hit too close, splintering the boulder behind Mercer's shoulder. Webb screamed, grazed along the arm. Another burst, this one lower. Chaos. Soldiers scrambled for cover. Rocks exploded under impact. Mercer shouted for flanking. Orders flew, but none were landing. The team was pinned down, and Elena moved. Not panicked, not frozen, calculated. She slung her pack, dropped flat to the dirt, and brought her scope up. Through the haze, the dust, and the wind, she found him, the shooter. Elevation 300 meters up, half hidden behind slate brush, using a thermal blind cover, standard mercenary gear. Her finger found the trigger. Her breath slowed, and then she heard the voice again, not in her ear, but in her memory. You fire to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She exhaled, a single, sharp breath. Crack. The shooter dropped. Mercer's head whipped around. Rourke, what the hell are you? He never finished. Crack. Elena adjusted by 6 degrees. A second target, hidden beneath a shale outcrop. Gone. Crack. The third, retreating. A clean shot mid-sprint. The rest fell silent. 3 enemies down in under 30 seconds. Webb's breathing slowed as Mercer looked over at Elena like he had never seen her before. She stood slowly, scanning the ridgeline. My grandfather was Master Sergeant Harlan Rourke, she said evenly. 217 confirmed eliminations, Vietnam. He trained me since I was 6. No one spoke. Even the wind held its breath. You tried to break me, Sergeant. But I was built by someone who knew how to survive. She moved past him, chambered another round, and took point. No one argued. Night fell over the Nevada mountains with a coldness that cut through body armor and bone alike. Alpha Team moved in near silence, the earlier firefight still clinging to their nerves. They had sustained 1 casualty, Rodriguez, hit in the leg, but stable, and 1 injury to Webb, who pressed gauze to his shoulder while still carrying his gear without complaint. At the front of the formation walked Elena Rourke. Not because she was a sign point, because no one questioned it anymore. Not even Sergeant Mercer. The mission had changed. What was supposed to be a high-pressure simulation had turned into a real combat situation with live enemy fire and uncertain terrain. The extraction zone at Grid Foxtrot 9er was still over 2 miles away, and every ridge, every shadow, held the threat of another hidden shooter. They moved single file through a dry wash that cut between 2 crags, red rock rising like cathedral walls around them. Moonlight bounced off pale stone and turned the sand into silver dust. Hold, Elena said quietly, raising her fist. Everyone froze. Up ahead, the canyon opened into a flat basin. A natural kill zone. Too exposed. No elevation, no cover. She turned back to Mercer. We move across in 2s. 90 seconds between pairs. Mercer hesitated. He was still trying to reconcile the fact that she had just saved his life hours ago. His instincts battled his pride. But this time, pride didn't win. He nodded. Do it. Webb and Thompson crossed first. Then 2 more. Elena stayed back with Mercer, scanning the slopes. They were almost through when the second ambush hit. It came not from the ridge, but from behind. A burst of automatic fire lit up the night like tracer flares, rattling through the canyon walls, the sound magnified tenfold by the echo. Elena dove and rolled, coming up behind a boulder. Rodriguez screamed, hit again, this time in the side. Mercer scrambled to drag him back while returning fire blind. Webb cursed into the radio, trying to raise support. Nothing but static. Where the hell is it coming from? Thompson shouted, bullets kicking up dirt around his boots. Elena already knew. She had caught in the sound. A slight delay in the echo, a distant angle of attack. The gunfire was bouncing off a southern wall. The shooters were coming from a side ridge, using elevation and darkness to their advantage. She crawled to a better vantage point and brought her scope up. 3 figures, silhouetted against the skyline, moving with precision, coordinated spacing. This wasn't a rogue cell. These were trained professionals, former military, possibly mercenaries with advanced training. Elena dialed her scope. One click for range. Two for wind. Her heartbeat slowed. Crack. First shooter dropped. The others reacted instantly, disappearing behind stone outcrops. Mercer tried to shout a command, but it was lost in the noise. Elena moved again, 10 feet to her right, over a narrow ledge, adjusting her position just enough to angle above their cover. The second shooter reemerged. Crack. Hit. The third broke into a sprint, flanking hard toward the ridge edge. Thompson fired but missed. Elena adjusted elevation and timing. She anticipated his movement, led the shot with a half-second delay. Crack. Third shooter fell, rolling down the slope in a lifeless sprawl. Silence followed. Not just silence, Dread. The kind that follows a storm when you don't know if the sky is done breaking yet. Mercer knelt beside Rodriguez, applying a field dressing. Webb was already stabilizing the wound with a splint, his fingers soaked with blood. "You're good," Webb muttered to Rodriguez. "You're staying awake. Just stay with us." They all turned to Elena. She stood slowly, rifle in her hands, smoke still curling from the barrel. "You think that's it?" Mercer asked. Elena shook her head. "No, that was a probe." Mercer blinked. "A probe? They were testing us, measuring response time, and now they know I'm here." "What does that mean?" Webb asked. "It means they'll bring more." The team looked at one another. The weight of those words sank like stone. The old mission, extract the package, survive a fake scenario, return for graduation, had disintegrated. They weren't trainees anymore. They were soldiers in the field, hunted, outgunned, and marked for elimination by enemies they couldn't identify. And for Elena, it was no longer about survival. It was about ending it. All of it. That night, they took shelter in a rock crevice wide enough to hide the team. Thompson took first watch. Webb stayed beside Rodriguez, who had begun to shiver despite the heat retained in the canyon. Elena found Mercer sitting alone, staring into the dark. "You were trained for this," he said finally. "Not just by the army. I mean really trained. Off books. Fieldcraft, long-distance reads, tracking enemy patterns, none of that standard." She didn't reply. Mercer turned to her, his voice low. "Who is he really? Your grandfather?" Elena pulled the old dog tag from her pocket and handed it to him. "Master Sergeant Harlan Rourke, Vietnam Special Forces, Congressional Medal of Honor. Over 200 confirmed kills, and twice that off the record. He was part of something called Silent Thunder, Black Ops sniper program. It was erased after Cambodia." Mercer turned the dog tag in his hands, reading the faded name. "He trained me since I could lift a rifle. Not to impress anyone, not to get promoted, but because he knew I'd need it one day. And today's that day," Mercer said quietly. No, she met his eyes. "Tomorrow is..." And she was right. Because just before dawn, as the team stirred and prepared to move again, a single drone passed overhead, silent and low, scanning their position with infrared. A moment later, the ridge behind them exploded. The explosion hit with concussive force, hurling loose rock and shattered shale down the canyon wall like a rain of steel. Webb threw himself over Rodriguez. Mercer yanked Elena down by the shoulder as firelight painted the sky in searing orange. The air filled with dust and the hiss of fragmented heat. Elena's ears rang, but her instincts overrode everything else. She was up and moving in seconds, dragging her rifle case behind a deeper rock fissure. Above them, the drone was gone, but the attack had achieved its purpose. They'd been found, and the next wave was already coming. "They've got air," she snapped. "That wasn't a random strike. That was laser-guided. They're triangulating with infrared." Mercer coughed, blood in the corner of his mouth from the impact. "We're cut off. We're surrounded," Thompson muttered, checking his rifle. "We'll never make it to the extraction." "Yes, we will," Elena said. "But we're not taking the planned route." She pulled a folded topographic map from her side pocket, already marked with pen and grease pencil. "Here," she pointed. "Subterranean passage. Old mining shaft from before the range was converted. It's not on the digital maps. It leads under the ridge and comes out half a click from the fallback evac zone." Mercer frowned. "You verified this?" "My grandfather did. He marked it in his logs during a joint training with NATO Spec Ops in '72. You're betting our lives on a 72-year-old map? Webb asked. I'm betting on Harlan Rourke, Elena said. It was no longer a matter of who gave orders. She gave them, and they followed. The shaft entrance was hidden behind a collapsed rock face and overgrown brush, just as her grandfather had noted. The steel hatch was rusted, but intact. Elena pried it open with her combat knife and led the way in. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and reeked of mineral water and metal rot, but held. The team moved in single file, flashlights off, NVG lenses flickering green in the blackness. Behind them, the sound of rotors grew louder. They're sweeping for heat, Elena whispered. If we stay below the surface for 12 minutes, we'll clear their scan window. How do you know that? Thompson asked. Because that's how long we used to run silent in winter training. Grandpa called it the ghost hour. You move slow, you breathe shallow, you become the terrain. Even Mercer had stopped questioning her. For the next mile, they descended deeper. Elena guided the group with nothing but instinct and memory. When the tunnel branched into two paths, she paused, recalculating. Her hand brushed the inner spine of her grandfather's notebook tucked into her chest rig. He'd written something she hadn't understood before. When you hear water, go against it. Upstream means elevation. Elevation means options. They took the left tunnel. Minutes later, the ceiling opened to starlight. They emerged on a slope high above the extraction point. Foxtrot Niner, an abandoned radar station surrounded by scrub and hard dirt. But something was wrong. Too quiet. Elena adjusted her scope. For figures moved around the perimeter. Not evac personnel. Mercs. They're waiting for us, she said. Extraction was a trap. Mercer slid beside her. We need another option. Elena narrowed her eyes. We don't need another option. We need a new plan. She tapped her earpiece. This is Alpha Team to command. Come in. Break. Alpha Team, urgent message, code Whiskey Tango. We are compromised at grid F9er. Repeat, compromised. Nothing. They're jamming comms now, she said. But if they're intercepting, they're listening. She grinned for the first time in days. Good. They split into pairs. Webb and Thompson set up decoys along the ridge, thermal packs wrapped in Kevlar to simulate body heat. Mercer circled wide with Elena, climbing above the target site, moving like ghosts between wind and rock. They had 20 minutes before sunrise. 20 minutes before visibility gave their enemies the edge again. I plant C4 behind the fuel drums, Mercer whispered. You take the far ridge and suppress the overwatch tower. No, Elena said. You take the ridge. I'm going in. Mercer stopped. Like hell. That's suicide. They're watching for your tactics. Not mine. You trained these men. You taught them to expect you. Not me. He stared at her. I'm not asking, Sergeant. I'm informing. Then she was gone. Inside the radar compound, Elena moved like smoke. The enemy was relaxed. Overconfident. 2 guards played cards near the comms relay. A third stood watch, bored, pacing the north wall. They had no idea death walked among them. She used the shadows, the cover of concrete angles, the subtle approach of silence. 1, 2, 3. By the time the first body hit the dirt, the others were already falling. Mercer detonated the C4. Fire erupted behind the compound. The Overwatch tower exploded in a burst of shrapnel. The mercenaries fell apart, disoriented, panicked. And then, from the far ridge, Webb fired the flare. A red arc, the evac signal. Moments later, 2 UH-60 Black Hawks roared into view, banking low and fast, bay doors open. The team moved. Elena hauled Rodriguez across the gravel, Webb limping behind them. Thompson and Mercer laid down cover fire as they all sprinted for the landing zone. One by one, they jumped into the chopper. Elena was last. As she turned back, one final figure stepped out from behind the radar building. A man in black tactical armor, wearing no insignia. He raised his rifle, and so did she. They fired at the same time. Only one bullet landed. The helicopter lifted off, blades screaming through the dawn. Blood soaked Elena's arm, but it wasn't hers. She sat in silence as the base shrank behind them, the desert burning gold in the rising light. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Elena had done more than survive. She had rewritten the rules of the war. And someone, somewhere, had just noticed. 3 weeks had passed since the Nevada operation. The firefight, the ambush, the mercenaries, the trap. Officially, none of it had happened. The after-action report was reduced to a one-paragraph incident involving a live-fire miscommunication and unexpected external interference. The mission was declared a classified irregularity. No disciplinary action, no formal recognition, just silence. But not everyone had forgotten. Inside Fort Croswell's main auditorium, rows of service members stood at attention. Dress blues, clean lines, silver polish reflecting the overhead lights. Along the front row sat high-ranking officials, some from branches Elena had never even worked with. Navy, CIA, SOCOM. There were even civilians in tailored suits and shoes too polished for any fieldwork. At the podium stood Colonel Dana Harrow, Division Commander for Special Operations, Training, and Sniper Advancement. She didn't smile. 3 weeks ago, an elite training unit encountered live hostile opposition during a field exercise. The team was cut off, surrounded, and outgunned. Her words fell like hammers. What followed was a tactical maneuver executed with such precision and discipline, our own evaluators mistook it for pre-planned simulation. She turned slightly toward the wings of the stage. But the truth is that one soldier made decisions no manual could have accounted for. She led under pressure. She executed under fire. And she saved every life on that field. The colonel paused. Corporal Elena Rourke. Front and center. Elena stepped into the light, her new dress uniform pristine, but her expression unchanged. She walked with the same economy of motion she'd used in the field, measured, efficient, unshakable. She saluted. The colonel returned it. For extraordinary leadership, valor under direct fire, and exceptional battlefield performance in defense of your unit, Colonel Harrow said, you are hereby awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The DSC was rarely awarded, and almost never to a corporal. But Harrow wasn't done. The citation reads, she continued, unfolding a document. While pinned under live fire, Corporal Rourke eliminated 7 hostiles, extracted 2 wounded teammates, and neutralized an enemy forward operating squad without any casualties among her unit. Her initiative directly enabled successful recovery of classified intelligence and the survival of her team. Elena received the medal in silence, but her eyes swept the crowd, and there, seated 2 rows behind the command staff, was Mercer. No longer standing tall, no longer smirking, just listening. Respectfully, after the ceremony, Elena stepped out into the open air. The late afternoon sun bathed the parade grounds in soft amber. She walked alone until a voice called her name. It wasn't Mercer. It wasn't Webb. It was someone she had never met. A woman in a gray uniform without patches or rank. Older, sharp-eyed, the kind of presence you didn't ignore. Corporal Rourke, she said. I'm Colonel Adriana Voss. I oversee a different kind of operation. Elena studied her. You're not from the sniper program. No, Voss said. But I knew your grandfather. The words hit like a silent detonation. You served with him? Elena asked. Not directly. I ran intelligence coordination for Silent Thunder in '74. Your grandfather was one of our most effective field assets. What he did saved hundreds of lives, but it never made the records. Until now. Voss held out a tablet. On it was an encrypted document bearing Elena's name. Your performance in Nevada matched something in our archives. We cross-referenced your shot placement, response time, and movement coordination. And there was only one match in the system. Elena didn't speak. You, Voss said, you're the match. Your grandfather left a set of profiles behind. He marked one candidate for future recruitment. Just one. He called her Eagle Zero. Elena stared at the screen. Why now? Because this world is changing. The threats we face today don't wear uniforms. They don't show up on satellite. They operate in shadows deeper than any war zone. We need soldiers who can disappear into those shadows, but also emerge to lead when it matters. And you want me. I want you to choose, Voss replied. I'm not asking for loyalty. I'm offering legacy. Elena looked down at the metal pinned to her chest. Then beyond it, to the dog tag in her pocket. The one with her name. The one pre-engraved years before she ever took her first shot. She didn't nod, didn't smile, but she said what mattered. I'll need my team. Voss's expression didn't change. Then you'll have them. 6 months later, the world changed and never knew it. A human trafficking ring operating under UN disguise in East Africa vanished overnight. No bodies, no evidence, just silence. A weapons convoy in Eastern Europe stopped transmitting after entering a canyon. Satellite footage showed it exiting empty. A biochemical weapons lab in Southeast Asia burned to the ground. The official story was an electrical fire. In all cases, no formal units were deployed, but a signal was detected before and after each incident. A sniper's flare, fired vertically, not for communication, but for closure. Ghost Division had arrived, and Elena Rourke now stood at the front of it. Inside a secure training compound hidden in the Italian Alps, 12 soldiers stood at attention in winter gear. 6 women, 6 men, each one hand-selected from Global Special Forces units. Each one bearing no insignia, no service record, no national allegiance. Only one motto. Elena faced them. The wind whipped against the snow. Her voice was low but carried with authority no rank could grant. You're not here to prove anything. You're not here to be seen. You're here to do what no one else can. She stepped to a firing bench, adjusted her rifle, lined up a target that no one else could see. You fire to defend those who cannot defend themselves, she said, echoing words buried in memory. And sometimes you fire to protect the person beside you, because they're all that stands between the world and what's coming next. She pulled the trigger. The shot echoed into history. The war they fought didn't make headlines, but the world slept safer because they never missed.